Realized something was wrong, but I couldn't figure out what it was. But I knew it was very serious, and I also knew that I needed to stay very calm.
You know, I'm also a stroke survivor. I'm actually the spouse of a stroke survivor, Patty. The thing that I think has been most critical for her recovery has been her tenacity and just perseverance and commitment to living in the world of the able body, even when it was extremely difficult for her to do.
I tried to call for my mom and dad, who were in the house, but they were pretty far away, so they couldn't hear me. And after several times of calling them, I actually realized maybe they couldn't hear me. Maybe there was no sound coming out of my voice because, you know, I was a little dizzy at that point, and I was sort of seeing colors, and I wasn't sure what was real and what was sort of in my head at that point. So I realized I needed help, and I got on my stomach, and I started to use sort of walls and doors to push and pull myself to the telephone. Managed to make it to the telephone and have it, I don't know how I got it to fall down on the floor. I hope you don't mind. And I remember I told her, I think I had a stroke. And she laughed and she said, "Really? What made you think you had a stroke?" And I said, "Well, I can't move my left side." And she said, "Well, how did you get to the phone?" I said, "It's a long story." The paramedics arrived. They had to break down my door because I have a habit of locking my door. And they saw how serious it was, and they really just scooped me up, took me to the hospital. I was in the hospital within about 20 minutes, maybe 25 minutes after the stroke. There was something really powerful that I remember when I was in the hospital, and that was they wheeled me into the room for the CAT scan. They took the CAT scan, and the medics were talking about me. And I heard one of them talk about which doctor they were going to call, which neurosurgeon they were going to call. And they talked about a few, and one said, "Oh, he can't make it until morning." And the other one said, "Well, that's if she makes it till morning." And I remember at that point looking around the room, and I was the only one there. And I had this realization that they were talking about me. And I realized at that point that it was very serious. Wow, is this what dying feels like? I don't feel like I'm dying. I'm not in pain. I don't feel panicked. I actually feel quite calm. And it was the first of many experiences I would have that night where I heard a lot about the fact that I may not be alive much longer. But I never lost consciousness. I never passed out. I never lost the ability to speak. And so in that way, I was very lucky and misfortunate. I had an intracerebral hemorrhagic stroke. It was centered in my thalamus. They were unable to operate because they would have done more damage to the brain tissue surrounding it. So at that point, it was really a waiting game. They had to wait to see if it stopped bleeding on its own. And if it didn't, then I would have died. I was fortunate I had a neurosurgeon who approached it with caution. He wasn't about going into the head very quickly. So he waited about 10 days, and on the 10th day, he was really close to operating because the swelling wasn't going down. And somehow, again, I was lucky, and the swelling stopped. The only damage I had was physical. If you drew a line down the middle of my body, everything on the left side was completely gone. My face was numb. I didn't have any palsy, but my face was numb, and I couldn't move anything. The neurosurgeon came in, and he told me about moving me to a hospital, a rehab hospital. And at that point, we really hadn't had a lot of information about what had happened to me and what the long-term prognosis was. And I remember asking him, "So when do you think I can get up and walk out of here?" And he looked real serious, and he said, "You know, I don't think you'll ever walk again, and if you do, it will take a really long time, and you may not have very good results." And I remember there was a lot of silence in the room with all of us, and it was a lot to take in, and I actually chose not to take it in at the time. I decided that wasn't going to be my truth. I would learn to do things like transfer from a wheelchair to a seat, or learn how to maybe use some sort of modified device to eat, or learn how to operate in a wheelchair. And at that point, he was preparing me for the fact that my life would be very different, and I would probably have to modify my home, and I wouldn't be able to work anymore, and wouldn't be able to drive or function like a normal person. So those things were starting to sink in. In terms of physical prognosis, I remember having a tremendous amount of fear because we knew what had caused the aneurysm at the time, but I had no idea whether it would come back. And they thought that there was a pretty good chance it wouldn't, because they would keep me on medication that would make sure to control the issues that caused it. But it was a tremendous amount of fear. So the prognosis I had was, permanent disability, a great unknown. And really, at that point, it was a matter of let's get you, functioning as much as you possibly can. I see myself as an optimist, but a realist. And I like to know the truth. I'm a problem solver. So for me, it was better to hear the truth. The problem is I don't know if I really heard the truth. I think that one of the frustrating things about being in that position is that nobody's really willing to tell you anything. I really wanted a lot of answers. And I got a lot of, gee, we're not sure. Nobody really knows. Kind of up to you, we just don't know yet, probably not a good outlook. But nobody could answer really any questions about anything for me. That was really scary. That actually was something I lived with for the first 5 years of my recovery. Yeah, about whether I would get any better, whether some of the issues I experienced would ever go away, some of the spasticity and the numbness and the energy level. That was really tough for the first 6 years. I searched the internet day and night, and anytime I asked an expert, they said, we don't know. Nobody really knows. And I guess now that is the truth, that nobody really does know how well you can get. But nobody's willing to tell you what they do know or what they've seen. For me, it was better to have the truth because I have a reality to work with and I know what I have to fight. And given that I'm a problem solver, that's what I needed. Because from that moment, I started putting together a plan. I'm about goals, so from before I got out of intensive care, I remember there were napkins on my little wheel-up table, and I started making goals, and they were simple things at first, like, be able to use the restroom on my own, right, and not a bedpan, or to have a shower, or to do simple things, get off the catheter, so that I could actually move toward, getting out of the hospital. In fact, I remember speaking with a lot of medical folks who said you want to hurry as fast as you can to get as much recovery as possible, because after a year, you won't see any more improvement. 100% untrue. It's interesting how the improvement works. There are plateaus, as you know. Plateaus are a very real part of this, and what I realized is every time I hit a plateau and I'm sitting at the plateau, I've learned to trust that I'm going to have a breakthrough. I will sit at a plateau for a year and not have any improvement, and then all of a sudden something will happen and I'll have a huge breakthrough. And it might be something small, like I remember when I was learning to move my fingers, and it took me 6 months to be able to do this. And when I thought it would never happen, one day it just did. And to me now that's become sort of the magic of recovery, but for a long time. Kevin has been with me from the moment this happened. And he's been with me when I've been at my lowest. And he's been with me when I've celebrated the ability to move my finger. And every single step. It's been hugely important for me to have my family, Kevin, my mom and dad, to be there when I've had a breakthrough, and also to be there when I'm on a plateau that just won't seem to end. It's okay to take a few minutes to just scream at the wind and be frustrated and get angry. I think when my family knows me, they know I'm very independent. They do get angry with me sometimes when I don't ask for help. But I think they've realized it's important for me to not ask for help, because I need to know that I can survive on my own, and I need to know that I can do it, and they've learned that. There are parts of my gait that I didn't learn to do right. At the time, it was more important for me to get mobile and to ambulate. It was more important to do that than it was to do it right, and it created some gait issues that have taken a really long time to correct. But I've stayed in contact with a few folks who we sort of came up together in the recovery ranks, and we compare notes on who we found as a therapist or technology that we have found, and they've been really useful and helpful for me to look into new technologies, whether it's new AFOs or new physical therapy opportunities. And I like to connect with folks who, like me, who are hungry to find new innovation out there, so I do stay in touch with them. There are some new tools out there that are wonderful recovery. There's a tool called the AlterG. It's a treadmill that was developed for NASA that allows people to run safely on a treadmill. And I remember I had an epiphany at the time. I remember saying, you know, I have a choice here. I can choose to go to a pretty dark place. I can sit in this wheelchair forever and probably nobody would blame me for not trying and just curling up in a ball. Or I could fight. And I remember the epiphany was that I had a choice. I could choose it. It didn't choose me. I might have found myself in this situation, but I could choose to fight every day. And I hope that anybody looking at this will choose to fight. I've been blessed, I've been incredibly humbled by this experience, and that's been a plus. And I have now gained an incredible appreciation and gratitude for life that I never would have known had it not this. And I also see people differently. I see people who struggle with disabilities, and having been both an able-bodied person and a disabled person, and now probably somewhere in the middle, I see things a lot differently. I have a lot more compassion. I have a lot more patience, and I think that's an upside as well. And I think I just look at life a little bit differently than I used to before. There's a little bit more of a quality in the way I look at life. And I still struggle a lot with life, and that's part of my recovery, because when you have a disability, it goes with you wherever you are. And you can't take a vacation from it. You can't outsource the recovery. It's always with you. And I struggle with that. But the upside is that I think it's made me a stronger person. I think right now, one of the biggest benefits is I'm not afraid of anything.
As a supporter of a survivor, I think it's just always checking in with the other person and seeing where they're at, and being understanding and knowing that they're going through something very challenging, and hopefully finding a way to let your strength be part of their strength, right? And just hearing what their body is telling them and being attuned to it and seeing how you can support the situation. She would just dig in on her recovery, double up on her swimming and therapy, and just say, I'm gonna do it. And she did.